Was Alyssa worried that she would lose the book and it would never find its way back to her? Or was she just bored during class and armed with a ballpoint pen? I'll never know for sure, but judging from her mind-numbingly thorough marginalia, she definitely finished the book, and then she definitely sold it back to the bookstore. Crime and Punishment is such a classic, that my Norton edition doesn't even bother listing a summary on the back cover. If you haven't read it, here's the lowdown. Raskolnikov, an impoverished ex-student in St. Petersburg, decides to murder a pawnbroker, not so much for the cash, but to test his wacko theories of morality and play the Nietzschean Übermensch. The murder is premeditated to such an extent that I'm not giving anything away here. This isn't a whodunit, it's a why-done-it. The thrills of the novel are psychological. From the very beginning, I was sucked in by Raskolnikov's degenerating mental state, but Alyssa's underlining and margin notes were a distraction. On page 1, she had underlined, "Afternoon early, came out of his little room, and made him frown with shame." Why these words? Was there something significant here I was missing? On page 2, the phrase, "wretchedly dressed that anybody else," was underlined. That didn't even make sense. Was she an idiot? Was she underlining without even reading? Solving the mystery of Alyssa became my meta journey through this book. I assembled my clues. First, there was her bubbly handwriting, which meant she could be anywhere from between 11 and 44 years old. Then there was her obsession with cataloging the themes of suffering, crime, and sacrifice. Hardly a page goes by without one of these words in the margins. In fact, in 465 pages, the word suffering appears in the margins 197 times. I counted. Sometimes there are slight variations. On page 100, Razumikin tells his friend Raskolnikov that he's worried that he hasn't eaten or drunk anything in 3 days. Suffering, no food, Alyssa notes. Maybe she was making notes for a term paper on suffering, but what would that even look like? Where could she begin? It's appropriate that Alyssa's obsession is with suffering because Dostoevsky's own biography is so depressing that I have concluded nothing good ever happened to him. Just before he turned 16, his mother died, and at 18, while away at school, his father was murdered by his own serfs at their country estate. According to one account, the serfs caught him when he was drunk and poured vodka down his throat until he drowned. For much of his life, Dostoevsky suffered from epileptic seizures, and Freud suggested that the onset of his seizures after his father's murder was just symptomatic of neurosis, that is, of severe hysteria. Dostoevsky was addicted to gambling and spent 4 years as a prisoner in Siberia after narrowly escaping the death penalty for basically being an intellectual. He hated yellow, he thought it was a terrible color, and that's why almost every interior room in Crime and Punishment is yellow. The more I read, the more I started to enjoy Alyssa. Her comments made me feel like I was passing notes with my girlfriends in 7th grade, or reading a live Twitter feed sent from her mind to the page. As the plot twisted and turned, we were surprised together. During the tense murder scene, 2 men outside the pawnbroker's apartment rattle the door and realize someone has locked it from inside. "Oh, snap," Alyssa wrote in all caps, with an arrow pointing to their dialogue. At the end of part 1, she drew a stick figure Raskolnikov, wearing a hat, with a thought bubble floating above his head. "I can't believe I did that," it says. Alyssa's influence on my reading experience is now evident in my own marginalia. By the end of the book, I've stopped using big words, stopped trying to identify themes, and started my own dialogue with Alyssa and Dostoevsky. "Is he following himself?" I wrote on page 235 during a dream sequence. "Can't tell if it's a dream," Alyssa wrote at the bottom of the next page, and I agreed. Though I never wrote "uh-oh" or "oops" or "wow" like Alyssa did, I did mark a paragraph in part 5 with an interrobang. It's after the scene when Raskolnikov takes a walk with Lebeziatnikov. He's back in his disgusting little yellow room, thinking of Sonia, who loves him purely and selflessly, but he feels hate towards her, and this made no sense to me, hence the interrobang. Weirdly, there were no marks from Alyssa on this page. Maybe we just have different definitions of suffering. Hers is madness, and mine is unrequited love.